Somewhere in the Arabian Sea at 2 in the morning, a $2.5 billion destroyer begins to turn away from the Iranian coastline and head south. There is no damage. There are no casualties. The ship is fully operational, its systems functioning perfectly, its crew ready for whatever comes next. And yet, it is leaving the fight. Just 12 hours earlier, that same ship launched its final Tomahawk cruise missile, cell number 96, the last one. Now every vertical launch cell on board is empty. 96 steel tubes, each capable of delivering precision strike power across hundreds of miles, now reduced to silent, hollow compartments. The mission itself was successful. That final missile struck an Iranian command node buried deep within the Zagros Mountains. The target was destroyed. The objective was achieved. But success has created a problem. Because out here on the open ocean, success cannot be sustained. Each Tomahawk missile weighs over 3,500 pounds and measures more than 20 feet in length. It is a precision-guided weapon packed with propulsion systems, guidance electronics, and a warhead designed to deliver devastating force with accuracy. Reloading such a weapon is not a simple process. It requires stability. It requires precision. It requires infrastructure. And that infrastructure does not exist at sea. The only place this destroyer can reload is a fixed port equipped with a shore-based crane. The nearest one lies more than 2,000 nautical miles away at Diego Garcia. The journey itself will take roughly a week. Once there, the ship will spend 3 to 5 days under a crane, carefully reloading each missile one by one. Then it will take another week to return to the operational area. 3 weeks. 3 weeks during which a $2.5 billion warship contributes nothing to the fight. This is the paradox of modern naval warfare. A vessel designed to project power across entire regions can be rendered ineffective, not by enemy action, but by the absence of a single capability: reloading. In less than 5 weeks, American forces launched more than 850 Tomahawk cruise missiles. This was not just a high number. It was unprecedented. It exceeded the total number of cruise missiles used in entire previous conflicts. It represented the highest rate of precision strike in modern military history. Every missile worked as intended. Targets across Iranian territory were destroyed. Command structures were dismantled. Airfields, production facilities, and naval bases were systematically neutralized. From a purely operational standpoint, the campaign was a success. But success created a new kind of problem, because every missile that leaves a launch cell creates a void, a space that cannot be filled again, at least not without leaving the battlefield. And that is where the real limitation begins to appear. The United States Navy does not have a firepower problem. It has a sustainment problem. Because the question is no longer how many missiles can be fired, but how long that level of firepower can be maintained. To understand why this problem exists, you have to start with the system itself. The Mark 41 vertical launch system. It is the backbone of modern American naval firepower. More than 60 warships carry it. Every Arleigh Burke destroyer, every Ticonderoga-class cruiser. Each ship built around the same concept, vertical cells, arranged in grids, each one holding a missile ready to launch at a moment's notice. Each cell is a steel tube, roughly 25 inches across, just wide enough to fit a missile canister, with only inches of clearance on each side. Inside that space sits a Tomahawk cruise missile, more than 20 feet long, weighing over 3,500 pounds, containing a turbojet engine, guidance systems, and a warhead packed with explosive force. This is not cargo that tolerates error. It is not something you can drop, adjust, or force into place. On land, the process is simple. A crane lifts the canister. It lowers it vertically. Guide rails align it. The canister slides into position. Everything is stable. The ground does not move. Gravity works exactly as expected. Now move that same process to the open ocean. A ship at sea does not remain still. It moves constantly in multiple directions at once. The bow rises and falls. The hull rolls side to side. The entire ship lifts and drops with the swell. It shifts forward, backward, and laterally. 6 axes of motion, all happening simultaneously. Now suspend a 3,500-pound missile from a crane cable above that moving deck. At that moment, the missile becomes a pendulum. As the ship rolls, the suspended load swings in the opposite direction. As the ship rises, the load drops. As the ship shifts, the load lags behind. This creates an uncontrolled oscillation, a constant, unpredictable movement that cannot be perfectly corrected in real time. Even in moderate sea conditions, nothing extreme, the amplitude of that swing exceeds the tolerance of the launch cell. And that tolerance is critical, because the canister must enter the cell perfectly aligned. If it impacts the side of the cell at an angle, steel meets steel. Inside the canister, rocket propellant and a warhead. One wrong impact, and the operation does not fail safely. It fails catastrophically. The Navy did not ignore this problem, they tried to solve it. Early Arleigh Burke destroyers were equipped with strike-down cranes, small onboard systems designed to lower canisters into launch cells at sea. But these systems came with limitations. They occupied space, reducing the total number of missiles the ship could carry. And more importantly, they could not reliably handle the weight and size of a full Tomahawk missile. Even in calm seas, their capability was limited, and calm seas are not a condition you can depend on in real operations. So the Navy made a decision. They removed the cranes. In exchange, they gained additional launch cells, increasing total missile capacity from 90 to 96. At the time, the logic made sense. Wars were expected to be short. Precision strikes would achieve objectives quickly, and 96 missiles would be enough. For decades, that assumption held, until it didn't. For more than 2 decades, the assumption held. 96 missiles were enough. Operations would be short. Precision would replace volume, and ships would return to port before their magazines became a problem. Then came Operation Epic Fury. Within the first 5 weeks, more than 850 Tomahawk cruise missiles were launched from American warships and submarines. It was the highest concentration of precision strike in modern naval history. This was not limited surgical engagement. This was sustained, high-tempo warfare. Missiles struck command and control nodes deep inside Iranian territory. They destroyed ballistic missile storage facilities. They dismantled drone production infrastructure. Airfields were cratered. Naval bases were neutralized before ships could even leave port. More than 150 Iranian warships were destroyed or rendered inoperable. Entire layers of military capability were removed within weeks. On paper, the campaign was a success. Every missile performed. Every target was hit. Strategic objectives were achieved faster than expected. But success created a new kind of failure, because every missile that launched left behind an empty cell, and those cells began to empty faster than anyone had planned for. An Arleigh Burke destroyer operating at full combat tempo does not stretch its firepower across months. It burns through it in days, simultaneously striking targets while maintaining air defense for a carrier group. Those 96 cells disappear quickly. When the last missile is fired, the ship faces a decision: stay in the fight without offensive capability or leave. It leaves. And this is where the real problem begins. A destroyer does not reload instantly. It must travel to a port with the necessary infrastructure. During Epic Fury, ports like Bahrain became saturated. Piers were full. Cranes operated continuously. Ships waited in line just to reload. If Bahrain was unavailable, the next option was Diego Garcia, more than 2,000 nautical miles away. 1 week to transit, several days to reload, 1 week to return, 3 weeks. Gone. Now scale that problem. If 10 destroyers are operating in the region and each burns through its magazine in less than a week at any given time, only a fraction of those ships are actually in the fight. Some are leaving, some are waiting, some are returning. The result is a cycle, a constant rotation of presence. A third of the force engaged, a third in transit, a third waiting to reload. The Navy does not lose ships, it loses availability, and that gap creates opportunity. In previous operations, similar patterns have already appeared. In the Red Sea, destroyers defending shipping routes exhausted their interceptor missiles and were forced to withdraw. Gaps opened in the defensive screen. Attacks followed those gaps because enemies do not need to defeat a fleet. They only need to exploit its absence. At this point, the problem is no longer theoretical. It is measurable, it is repeatable, and it is predictable. The Navy can fire faster than it can reload. The Navy knew this problem was coming. Long before Epic Fury, engineers had already begun working on a solution. The issue was clear. Not firepower, not targeting, not accuracy, reloading. And at the center of that problem was one thing: the pendulum. Every previous attempt to reload missiles at sea had failed for the same reason. A suspended load, moving unpredictably over a moving deck. So the solution was not to improve the crane, it was to eliminate the pendulum entirely. That solution became known as TRAM, the Transferable Reload at Sea method. The concept was simple, but the execution changed everything. Instead of suspending the missile canister from a cable, TRAM locks it into a rigid system. Hydraulic arms clamp the canister in place. A rail system, physically connected to the ship's structure, moves it into position. The missile is no longer hanging freely. It is no longer reacting to motion. It moves with the ship, as part of the same structure. The pendulum disappears. The process works step by step. A supply ship pulls alongside during underway replenishment. The missile transfers across using existing methods. Once on board, TRAM takes control. The canister is secured, moved horizontally into position, rotated vertically, and lowered into the launch cell with controlled precision, not by gravity, but by engineered motion. In 2024, the system was tested, first on land, then at sea. In moderate sea conditions, a test canister was successfully loaded into a vertical launch cell while underway. For the first time, the problem appeared solved. Plans were made to field the system across the fleet. Late 2026, early 2027, but Epic Fury began in early 2026. The system existed, it worked, and it was not there. TRAM solves one equation, how to reload missiles at sea, but it does not solve the second, how to produce enough missiles to reload in the first place. During Epic Fury, more than 850 Tomahawk missiles were fired in just 5 weeks. Now compare that to production. In peacetime, annual output ranged between 60 and 90 missiles per year. That means the fleet consumed nearly a decade of production in just over a month. Scaling production is not instant. It requires factories, supply chains, specialized components, skilled labor. Each missile takes months to build, sometimes longer. This is not software. It is metal machined, assembled, tested. The physics of manufacturing do not accelerate simply because demand increases. So even if TRAM eliminates the need for ports, even if ships can reload in hours instead of weeks, the limiting factor remains: time. At the beginning, the problem looked like a design flaw, a missing capability, a system that could not reload itself. But at the end, the picture changes. Even if the Navy had solved reloading years earlier, the magazines would still run empty, because the real constraint is not distance, not physics, not engineering, it is production. The speed at which weapons can be built compared to the speed at which they can be used. Modern warfare has reached a new threshold, where firepower can exceed industrial capacity. And in that environment, the most important machine is not the missile, not the radar, not the ship. It is the factory, because the outcome of the war is no longer determined only by what can be fired, but by what can be replaced. So what do you think? Has modern warfare reached a point where industrial capacity matters more than battlefield technology? And if a navy can fire faster than it can build, is that power or a limitation waiting to be exposed? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And if you want more deep, cinematic military breakdowns like this. Make sure to subscribe and stay tuned for the next episode.